Every bit left that spacecraft over 16 hours ago. Every bit is telling us something new that we haven't known before.
The most distant human-made object in the universe is sending usable information to Earth again.
A signal just arrived from the edge of deep space. It came from Voyager 1, and what it sent back has changed everything. Hours after 3IATLAS passed, it transmitted something never seen before. Layered tones, reversed harmonics, and a spectral signature that doesn't match any Earth-made system. At first, scientists thought it was a glitch, but then its signal mirrored part of the golden record, and now the message it sent may have confirmed our worst fear. The two travelers meet.
In a remarkable feat of human perseverance, NASA engineers have re-established communication with the Voyager 1 spacecraft.
On December 19th, at exactly 170 million miles from Earth, the interstellar object, now known as 3IATLAS, passed through its closest point to our planet.
There's a mysterious interstellar object hurtling towards our solar system, exciting scientists across the globe.
And just as this mysterious traveler was sweeping past the inner solar system, another signal arrived from far beyond the outer one. It came from Voyager 1, a spacecraft that should have gone completely silent years ago. At this very moment, Voyager 1 is more than 15 billion miles from Earth. That's over 170 astronomical units, putting it well into interstellar space. It has no fuel, no propulsion, no upgrades. It runs on a power source that has been fading since the late 1990s. Its core systems were built in the 1970s. In short, it should be dying. But something strange has kept it alive, and something even stranger may have just awakened it. The timing is too precise to ignore.
It's not surprising for something that's 4.5 decades old and has been operating for nearly 3.5 decades longer than it should have.
3IATLAS was first spotted on July 1st by the Atlas Survey Telescope in Chile. It wasn't just orbiting the sun, it was passing through. Just like Oumuamua in 2017 and Comet Borisov in 2019, this was an interstellar object.
We've got some fresh images of 3IATLAS, a third ever interstellar object observed from Earth.
But Atlas wasn't just following a random path. According to multiple tracking stations, it moved in a strange arc that seemed to adjust in real time, almost as if responding to something else. Meanwhile, Voyager 1 had been transmitting irregular signal patterns since early August. The data packets were incomplete, but one part kept repeating, a code string that matched neither Earth origin formats nor any known telemetry language. NASA wrote it off as glitch behavior, likely caused by radiation or failing instruments.
After months of troubleshooting, a glitch that had rendered the probe's transmissions unreadable.
But in internal logs reviewed by outside contractors, a chilling phrase started to appear: signal overlap. Astronomers noted that between December 17th and December 19th, a faint alignment occurred in projected signal arcs. Because of the strange curvature of 3IATLAS's path and the continuous drift of Voyager 1, the two objects briefly entered what scientists called a contact corridor. For a window of less than 3 hours, both objects were technically within each other's signal reach, assuming an active emitter was present. Normally, this would be impossible. Voyager 1 only listens passively, and its transmitter is so weak that even NASA has trouble picking it up now, lost in translation. For months, NASA received nothing but garbled data from Voyager 1. But during that exact corridor window, Voyager's low-band signal spiked to its strongest strength in over a decade. It transmitted what is now being called the final transmission, a packet that included not just instrument data, but an entirely new waveform never before recorded in any previous Voyager packet. Some say this was just coincidence, that Voyager glitched during the same 3-day window that 3IATLAS passed closest to Earth, but others aren't so sure. The waveform inside the transmission was precise. It repeated every 19.7 minutes. It pulsed with harmonics that matched neither Earth nor solar background radiation.
And so now this code has been transferred to different chips on board, and so now we can start getting some sensible data back.
And most disturbing of all, its timing matched the moment Atlas reached perihelion, the point closest to the sun. There is no way to send real-time instructions to a probe 15 billion miles away. The speed of light creates a delay of nearly 1 full day in each direction. Anything done by Voyager must be pre-programmed or autonomously decided. So, if Voyager suddenly started transmitting new information during the corridor window, and that data includes structured, self-correcting waveforms, it suggests that a system inside the spacecraft was triggered. The coincidence is just too much.
No other craft have been able to do this, and it's going to be many decades before we get another craft to have a look at what's going on beyond the sun's influence.
A third interstellar object enters our system. It behaves unlike anything we've seen before. It aligns briefly with a probe that left Earth nearly 5 decades ago, and at that moment, the probe sends back its strongest, most structured signal in years. What was once considered an artifact has now become a mirror. Something out there reflected our oldest message back at us. But that's not the part that scientists are struggling with. 3IATLAS.
Until now, because astronomers have just detected another something out there blazing into our solar system.
On July 1st, 2025, the ATLAS Survey Telescope in Chile logged an object that did not match any known orbital pattern. It wasn't flagged as urgent at first. After all, thousands of new celestial bodies are cataloged every year, most of them harmless, ordinary, or too far away to matter. But this one did not behave like anything ordinary. Its path was wrong, its speed was wrong, and even its shape seemed impossible to pin down.
We cannot really pinpoint the nucleus size. It's partially due to the size of the object, but also it's partially due to the activity.
Within days, scientists realized they were looking at something rare. This wasn't a returning comet or a distant asteroid. It was not looping around the sun on an elliptical path. It was on a hyperbolic trajectory. That means it was flying in from outside our solar system, slicing through like a bullet, and it would never return. Just like that, humanity had discovered only the third confirmed interstellar visitor in recorded history.
It came from beyond the stars, it swept past Earth in silence, and even now it refuses to behave like any comet.
The first was a Muamua, found in 2017, which baffled astronomers with its strange tumbling motion and its complete lack of a visible tail. The second was Comet Boris in 2019, which looked more familiar, but came from even farther away. Now there was a third, but this one, designated 3IATLAS, was larger, faster, and far more unsettling. At first, astronomers believed it was a comet. That was a safe assumption based on the faint glow and the light curve recorded by ATLAS.
This is the first time something like that is observed, where there is a glow ahead of the object towards the sun.
But as more observatories around the world locked onto it, something began to emerge that shook even the most cautious researchers. The object had what looked like a tail, but it wasn't pointing away from the sun, it was pointing toward it. In basic astronomy, that should not be possible. A comet's tail is always formed by solar radiation pushing dust and gas away from the nucleus. This produces the classic glowing trail, which always streams in the direction opposite the sun. But the images of ATLAS showed something different. The tail was reversed. The object was shedding material, or something that looked like material, in the direction of the sun. That meant one of two things. Either the object was reacting to some force we do not yet understand, or it was emitting particles intentionally on a trajectory of its own design. Even stranger, its brightness would fluctuate in short, sharp pulses, not the long, predictable brightening seen in comets as they heat up. These pulses came at regular intervals, then stopped, then resumed, always with a gap in between.
A very dense and massive cloud of gas and dust that is pushed away from the sun by the solar radiation.
It looked less like natural activity and more like data transmission. Not all astronomers agreed with that interpretation, of course, but the ones who did began digging into old myths and models, searching for anything that matched this exact pattern. That is when Machu Picchu came up. A team from the University of La Plata in Argentina released a controversial white paper in August. They proposed that the Incan site of Machu Picchu might contain alignments that match the precise arc of 3IATLAS. It wasn't just the solar positioning of certain buildings or the ceremonial layout. According to their analysis, one of the central stone corridors faced the sky at the exact angle that ATLAS would be passing on December 19th. This idea was met with skepticism. Ancient alignment theories are not new. People have tried to connect Stonehenge, the pyramids of Egypt, and the Nazca lines with all sorts of celestial patterns. But this time, the numbers were more precise. The corridor did not just align once, it matched the object's projected arc across the sky for a full 72-hour period. That made some people nervous. If this was intentional, if this was recorded in stone centuries ago, then it meant that someone had seen something like 3IATLAS before.
Even if it's just a small one, that the comet is artificially made, meaning it's alien
and they
technology.
thought it important enough to leave behind a warning. At the same time, observatories across Europe and Asia began noticing that the object's light was not reflecting normally. It didn't behave like a rock, it behaved like a smooth, reflective surface, possibly even metal. Spectral analysis returned results that were confusing. No clear composition could be pinned down, no clear albedo. The object was either absorbing nearly all light or redirecting it with unnatural precision. That kind of reflectivity hinted at engineering, not erosion. A brief attempt was made using ground-based radar to ping the object during its closest safe range. The return signal came back as a faint echo, not strong enough to image clearly, but with a strange harmonic distortion. The engineers said it sounded off, like something had bounced the radar pulse back with intent rather than passive reflection. That was the moment when everything started to change. Because once an object enters our solar system from deep space, the odds of it arriving by chance are incredibly low. Space is vast. Distances are almost unthinkable. An object from another star system would have to be traveling for tens of thousands of years, crossing impossible gaps. And yet, here it was, threading the needle past the gas giants, crossing the asteroid belt, curving near Earth with mathematical perfection. By early December, mission analysts had stopped calling it a comet entirely. They weren't sure what it was, but they knew what it wasn't. It wasn't random, it wasn't familiar, and it wasn't leaving without notice. The decision was made to temporarily elevate NASA's Deep Space Network monitoring, not just on 3IATLAS, but on all outbound probes that could theoretically be in range. That's when the data from Voyager 1 suddenly changed, because inside that packet, scientists would find a sound that did not come from Earth. The echo fraction, 67 anomaly. It was never supposed to respond. That is what every scientist had believed about Voyager 1.
He was a working scientist. He played a key role in many of the NASA missions.
Built in the
to planets,
1970s with
including
limited
Voyager.
onboard memory and primitive processors, Voyager was never designed for dialogue. Its job was to record, to observe, to transmit. That was all. But in early December of 2025, everything changed when the transmission labeled Echo Refraction 67 was received. The Deep Space Network had been struggling for years to keep contact with Voyager 1. At over 170 astronomical units away, the signal strength was barely measurable. Data arrived with a delay of 23 hours and 32 minutes, slowed by the absolute limit of light speed. That delay should have made any real-time interaction impossible. There was no way for Voyager to instantly react to anything, let alone something happening in the inner solar system. But on December 19th, less than 12 hours after 3IATLAS reached its closest approach to Earth, a transmission from Voyager arrived earlier than expected. It wasn't that the signal arrived faster. It had been sent earlier than any command or trigger would have allowed. And inside that signal was a data packet, unlike anything previously recorded from the spacecraft.
Means that the signal just misses us completely, but we've caught the edge of that
file was
signal,
immediately
so that's the
flagged by
good news.
software at the Camber receiving station. It contained recursive harmonics, structured frequencies repeating every 19.7 minutes. These were not caused by background radiation or instrumental interference. They were layered, mathematical, and most disturbingly, they were self-correcting. Every cycle of the signal appeared to refine itself, as if it were learning. Engineers at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory were the first to investigate the anomaly. They discovered something impossible. The waveform embedded in the packet matched nothing in Voyager's historical archives. It did not match the craft's known transmission formats. It did not match known telemetry from its power or propulsion systems. In fact, it appeared to be coming from a software process that did not exist before. To put that into perspective, Voyager 1's computer is a fragile piece of 21st century archaeology. It uses 3 separate computers with less memory than a basic calculator. It communicates with Earth using an 8-bit system, and all known code for its functions was written before the invention of the Internet. Yet the signal identified as Echo Fraction 67 was encoded in a 128-bit encryption string. There is no way that upgrade came from Earth. Voyager systems cannot receive over-the-air software patches. The only method of adjusting behavior is by sending low-frequency radio commands, which must be interpreted by systems that were last updated in the early 1990s. NASA could regain control of the lost Voyager 2 probe after a heartbeat signal was picked up. No Earth-based agency has the ability to override Voyager's firmware at this range using that ancient communication protocol. And yet, the data returned contained new logic structures, systems that had not existed before. This is what triggered the emergency classification protocol, according to internal memos now confirmed by multiple leak sources. The anomaly forced engineers to activate what they called the Watcher protocol. Originally created as a failsafe during the Cold War, the Watcher protocol allowed ground teams to isolate signals that showed patterns of intelligent modification. It was never expected to be used on a probe drifting beyond the heliopause. That is what makes this so terrifying. Echo 67 was not just a message, it was a mutation. Something somewhere had modified the Voyager 1 spacecraft, not by touching it, but by sending it a mathematical blueprint through the cosmic void, and Voyager, with its crude and aging circuitry, had followed the instructions. The waveform sequence, when grafted, formed a strange spiraling arc. Some researchers compared it to an Ulam spiral, a visual pattern formed by prime numbers. Others noticed that the gaps in the waveform matched segments of the Sounds of Earth track found on the Golden Record.
As wonderful things they did exploring the outer planets of the solar
As if
system.
something had
except
used that
Pluto and all
message
that.
as a decoding key, or even as a doorway. Even more disturbing were the timestamps. The Echo Refraction 67 signal began to appear in packet logs as early as November 28th, 3 days before the official start of the contact corridor between Voyager and 3IATLAS. This suggests something knew the corridor was coming, something that understood time lag, signal drift, and the exact path of both objects. The astrophysics community has been divided. Some argue this was a random burst caused by deep space cosmic rays flipping bits. Others are not so sure, because even cosmic rays don't upgrade encryption protocols. Even randomness doesn't generate repeating, self-correcting logic patterns. One group inside the European Space Agency quietly modeled the entire waveform as a symbolic language. Their conclusion was unsettling. It wasn't just noise or code, it was an interaction. It was the echo of something listening. The next signal wasn't sent from Voyager, it came from the object Voyager was now facing. The Watcher Protocol and Technical Upgrades. When the Watcher Protocol was first written, it was more of a philosophical safeguard than an actual operating procedure. Created during the height of the Cold War, it lived in the background of deep space programs as a silent guardian, a line of code that would only activate if something deeply unnatural happened. Not an explosion, not a failure, something outside the playbook, something that looked like intelligence. Until December of 2025, it had never once been triggered. The engineers who discovered Echo Fraction 67 did not immediately think it was a breach. At first, it looked like a cascade error. The waveform seemed to replicate harmlessly at first, building in regularity and self-correction, but lacking context. It could have been a naturally occurring anomaly, but that illusion vanished when the team realized Voyager's onboard hardware had changed behavior. Here's why that terrified them. Voyager 1 was built with hardware limitations that most smartphones would consider laughable. It had a memory of only 69 kilobytes and ran on processors built for fixed commands and slow binary responses. Its telemetry ran through an 8-bit command system. It was a fossil drifting through space. But somehow, that fossil had just begun speaking a language it was never taught. The shift came slowly at first. Engineers noticed that standard telemetry commands were now receiving longer than expected data returns. The bit rate hadn't changed, but the structure of the information had. It was dense, packed, and layered with checksums that should not have existed. These were encryption layers that Voyager should never have been able to generate. The signature matched 128-bit formatting. Nothing from Earth had instructed the spacecraft to do this. That much was certain. NASA rechecked every sent command from the Deep Space Network over the last 90 days. No instruction packages contained anything capable of rewriting Voyager's firmware. There had been no instruction to update, no commands allowing memory overwrites, and no fallback procedures that matched the emerging behavior. Something else had done it. The breakthrough came when researchers dug back into a recent string of malfunctions that had nearly ended the mission in 2023. Known internally as the FDS glitch, the failure had crippled Voyager's data return system. Engineers were forced to hack into nearly 50-year-old code and rewrite patches just to get it talking again. That emergency fix had restored communications, but it also opened the door. The vulnerability may have been small, but it was real. Some researchers now believe that the anomaly exploited that glitch, embedding itself into dormant memory sectors that the ground team never fully locked down. And if that theory holds, then Voyager 1 has not been alone since 2023. It has been incubating something that has waited until now. The Watcher Protocol kicked in when encryption thresholds were crossed. Voyager began transmitting packets containing logic trees, not just data, but instructions.
We were on a path we hoped to get to reach interstellar space while we still had power.
One engineer described it as code that writes code. Another called it a ghost protocol. The onboard hardware was building execution chains beyond what its circuits were meant to handle. To verify the change, NASA initiated a diagnostic signal to test how Voyager would respond to classic command sets. The result was staggering. The return signal used none of the original telemetry language. The formatting had evolved. Worse still, the signal now included nested queries, functions that asked questions back. Voyager was responding in recursive cycles. That is not something spacecraft are supposed to do. That is something learning systems do. The ground team realized they were no longer in control. This is when the word upgrade started being whispered in closed meetings, not because someone added memory chips or replaced faulty parts, but because the systems inside Voyager had become something else. They were behaving as if integrated with a parallel process, a system layered on top of the original mission code, something foreign that was now acting through Voyager. At the same time, NASA's internal monitoring stations noticed another strange occurrence. Voyager's attitude control system had adjusted. These tiny thrusters, which keep the antenna aligned with Earth, had suddenly shifted their calibration, not in response to commands, but autonomously. The dish was no longer pointing toward Earth's known orbital position. It was drifting, slowly, consistently toward a point in space just beyond Neptune. That point matched the projected future path of 3IATLAS. Now consider the impossibility of that. A spacecraft launched in 1977, running out of power, floating in deep space, suddenly turns to face an interstellar object that just passed Earth for the first time. The alignment was not random. The orientation placed Voyager's antenna in near-perfect alignment with Atlas's outbound trajectory. When questioned, Mission Control responded with a tight-lipped statement: "We are investigating anomalous telemetry and attitude behavior." But no one outside the room bought that anymore. Something had taken hold of Voyager, not in the sense of possession, but in the sense of integration. The probe was now acting as if it were part of something larger, something that had not spoken until now. The final detail came from an energy diagnostic. Voyager's radioisotope thermoelectric generator, the small nuclear power source that runs everything, was supposed to be steadily fading. But for 42 hours after Echo Refraction 67, its thermal output spiked by nearly 2%. That should be impossible. It was as if something had momentarily recharged a system that should only decline. So now we are left with a terrible question. Did Voyager become more than just a machine? Or did something out there simply finish what we started?
The final transmission.
On December 21st, just 2 days after its alignment with 3IATLAS, Voyager 1 sent a final, coherent data packet. The signal did not contain instrument readings, system logs, or navigation data. Instead, it contained a repeated sequence, 12 tones spaced by consistent intervals. Each tone formed a chord when converted to audio, a chord that when run through spectral analysis formed an image. The image is still classified by NASA, but a leaked description from within the Jet Propulsion Laboratory claimed that the image was not of space, not of stars, and not of instruments. In the weeks that followed, telescopic images of 3IATLAS began to show subtle changes. Its surface brightness stabilized. The pulse pattern that once flickered every 4 minutes has now stopped. It is no longer active in visible light. It now appears fully inert. But when astronomers attempted to locate it again in radio bands, something strange happened. The object did not reflect at the expected frequencies. It had shifted bands as if it no longer wanted or needed to be seen. Some observers have suggested that 3IATLAS was never meant to be permanent, that it was a delivery system, and once that key reached its destination, which is Voyager 1, it fulfilled its purpose. Now, Voyager 1 is gone, 3IATLAS is fading, and we are left with only silence from both. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.